I don't even know how to begin this one. Buckle up, because things might get rocky. But I'm going to need a lot of puns to get me through this one. The more time I spend talking about Islam, the more disappointed I am. I mean, I've always known that Muslims will hate me to some extent or another, but I keep having high expectations from them. Not in their interactions with me, that's kind of a write-off for me, but I mean just in general. For example, merely 6 months ago, I deluded myself into thinking that if I just simply point out the atrocities that Islam allows, their humanity is going to take over. I mean, I don't expect them to renounce Islam overnight, but at least to feel some unease as they justify or ignore these things. But I was wrong. I was so wrong, and my expectations are continuously lowered for the Ummah. Islam, like many other religions, destroys the believer's empathy. It normalizes this idea of horrifying torture and that some people deserve it. It scares the believer using the same scare tactics, the threats of torture, into believing that anything God decrees is good. For example, if Allah decrees that slavery is good, if you add a few rules to it, then it is good. If Allah decrees that stoning people to death can be good in specific situations, then it is good. If Allah or Muhammad decrees that a certain man can have as many wives as he wants and everyone else in the world is limited to 4, then that is good. Not that I'm complaining or anything, 4 is way too many. Let's see a demonstration of this lack of empathy from Muslims on the internet. Not 1 or 2, but tens of thousands of Muslims, if not more. I made a short video satirizing how believers will go to extreme lengths to, they're going to have a hard time justifying the punishment of stoning. I was so wrong. Muslim apologists flocked to my comments and made their own videos to defend Allah's religion. How? By saying that rapists, pedophiles, murderers, and etc. deserve to be stoned to death. Oh, and that I, among other people, deserve to be stoned. I mean, if you insist.
Smoke weed every day.
I should have prepared this fake joint earlier. Now, before we fall for that disingenuous apologist trap, we have to remind ourselves that the topic at hand isn't merely the ethics of torture and who deserves it. No. We can simply examine the specifics of how adulterers and homosexuals deserve to be stoned to death according to Muslims and Islam in general, because that is what stoning is for. If you don't believe me, that's fine. You can ask Muslim scholars. In fact, I implore you to. Those who decides on the matters of fiqh, jurisprudence. I suspect that a lot of Muslims went through life without realizing or thinking about what stoning means or entails, so let's talk about it. The 4 major schools of jurisprudence, Hanafis, Shafi'is, Hanbalis, and Malikis, all agree that adulterers should be stoned to death. Adulterers are married people who are having an extramarital affair. Hanbalis, however, they say that even all other sorts of consensual but religiously illegal sex is punished that way. Notice how I said consensual. This has nothing to do with rape. So it's not just married couples. In fact, Hanbalis say that homosexuals shouldn't be stoned to death. They think homosexuals should be beheaded instead.
Oh no!
I know.
You know that when they say they want head, that's not what they mean. So that's all 4 major schools of jurisprudence. They all agree. However, they do disagree on some things. Let's be fair. Some think that the first to throw a stone should be accuser and the witnesses. Then the community takes over. It's fun for the whole family. Some think that the imam should throw the first stone. Some think that the accused should be standing up. Some think that the hole needs to be dug for the accused to be stoned in. Except, check this one detail out. According to Hanafis, a woman specifically, sentenced for stoning should be partially buried up to her chest. I wonder why that is. When they say that there's room in Islam for disagreement, this is what they mean. Exactly how you are stoned and how gender affects how deep the hole is. Hanafi scholars even go as far as to specify the size of the stone to be used. For example, they say here, the size of one's hand. It should not be too large to cause death too quickly, nor too small to extend only pain. While it's nice that the Hanafis think that you shouldn't extend their pain, you shouldn't kill them too quickly either. they need to suffer. Isn't Islam so peaceful? Scholarly opinions in Islam are just such a mixed bag. Sometimes they're talking about which foot to use to enter the washroom with, because angels and jinn and other superstitious stuff. And sometimes they're talking about how to smash someone's head to death without killing them too quickly. So much peace. Oh, and for the Muslim feminists out there, the Hanafi school of thought does not allow a woman to be one of the 4 witnesses because equality. Just kidding. Because Muhammad doesn't think that you're mature enough to remember catching 2 people having sex. That's a new low in terms of intellectual deficiencies. How often does it happen that you catch 2 people having sex in an Islamic state and then you misidentify the 2 because you're just a woman with a little tiny brain? Oh, I keep going on these tangents. Anyway, there's some disagreement about whether adulterers and homosexuals should be lashed 100 lashes or stoned. But is that really an upgrade? Thanks for choosing Islam Airlines. Here's your one-way ticket. You'll be heading to... No, I'm sorry. You'll be beheaded. It's a bit of a tongue twister. Thanks, but actually, I'm not gay. Oh, that's right. I'm so sorry for the mix-up. Let me fix that real quick. Here you go. You'll be stoned to death, gate 13B. I can't believe I was the one who requested this. Actually, sir, I just found out that you can be upgraded to a lashing instead. Would you like that? Why would I want to live among you after being tortured by you? Yeah, that's a good point. Anyway, thank you for choosing Islam Airlines. We hope that you consider us in the future. Oh. So, to bring it back to the point of this video, I'm not discussing the morality of stoning the worst of criminals, such as murderers, which is not even the crime being punished here. It's particularly silly when Muslims ask me, so do you think even Hitler doesn't deserve to be stoned to death? A discussion about humanity would go right over the religious apologist's head, so please, if you're fishing for a quote to use to make views off of my videos, focus on the point that I'm making. Islam prescribes stoning for adultery and often for homosexuality. I'm going to dedicate a whole video to my thoughts about the LGBT in Islam. I want to get ahead of some of the apologetics, so here's a lightning round of responses. This doesn't happen anymore, except when it does. We just quickly dismiss it and we say it's not real Islam, those are not real Muslims, etc., etc. This is only meant to scare people. You mean the definition of terrorism? The use of violence or the threat of violence in the pursuit of political, religious, ideological, or social objectives. Well, congratulations. People are scared of you and your religion because you sound like a supporter of a fascist regime. It's all meant to just, scare people into being better. It's meant to keep the peace. It's for the greater good. It's for the greater good. It's for the greater good. Long live the Ummah. You need 4 reliable witnesses for that. So we're not arguing whether it is in Sharia or not. We're arguing about how it happens. And by reliable witnesses, you mean no women? How the hell do you define a reliable witness in this world? And what about cameras? I know that's a question that came up in Islamic fiqh lately. What if someone records one of these crimes? Isn't that more reliable than 4 guys who said that they saw something? And if you quote a scholar that says, no, a camera's not enough, there has to be 4 men, that doesn't make the issue go away. Because honestly, it is dumb to say that the witness testimony of 4 men is more reliable than a camera. But, don't get me started on photoshopping and video editing and this and that. Let's focus on the point here. And there's going to be a lot of scholars who will stone someone based on video evidence of them doing something so heinous as, being gay. And that's all distracting from the fact that, being gay and adultery are not crimes that deserve torture. Like, being gay is not a crime at all. But adultery, though it breaks up families, though it causes a lot of pain and possibly ruins lives, it is not grounds for torturing someone to death. Are you really happy with your spouse only being with you because the alternative is a gruesome death? What kind of family relationships do you have? No wonder people don't get divorced in Muslim countries, not as often. Muslims keep boasting about how divorce rates are lower in Muslim countries. Well, why do you think that is? So you support adultery, rape, murder? Do we have to do this again? Just because I'm against one barbaric form of execution or punishment doesn't mean that I'm okay with crime. This one right here takes the cake. When the Prophet stoned this Jewish woman, she's the one who asked for it, and it was normal in Judaism. So the poor Prophet could do nothing except stone her to death. I mean, he's got his hands tied, except when he was throwing stones, of course. Even as a Muslim, I was opposed to this. I told myself that this is un-Islamic and I didn't look further back when I was a Muslim. But I'm urging you to do so. To wrap this up, there isn't anything that I said here that is up to debate. This is not some form of argument. I don't need to convince you or any sane person in the secular world that stoning someone to death is inhumane, regardless of who that person is, but especially for the things that you consider crimes worthy of torture. Especially when there are other reasons to execute a criminal humanely for a crime that one could argue does deserve execution. But I'll give the Dawah Men an opportunity to embarrass themselves and the whole ummah in the process. So I have questions for you, Dawah Men, and I already know the answers. You're proud of that. Sorry, my voice doesn't go that high. I know the answers because you are so predictable. You are slaves of Allah, which in the real tangible world means that you are, what was the word for it? Mentally enslaved and intellectually molested. You cannot have an original thought that disagrees with Islam. So I ask you the following. Is stoning a human to death Islamic? The answer is yes. How will you be defending Muslims from, as you call it, Islamophobia or hate or bigotry once these hudud start happening more often as Taliban takes over Afghanistan? Are you going to say that those are not real Muslims? This is not real Islam? But this is Islamic, so how can you differentiate it? Is it just because they have different motives? This one's more of a rhetorical question. How do you not realize that the world is watching you? Every time you refute, debunk, whatever it is that you call it, something like this, by sort of softly condoning it, or maybe not so softly, the world is watching you. You are contributing to fear and hatred of Islam and by association Muslims. I don't think there's anything unreasonable to fear about what I just said. But every time you Dawah Men defend the act of pelting someone to death till their brains fall out, till you can see the life drain out of their eyes, you make Muslims look like monsters. If anything, you might turn some Muslims into monsters because once they've accepted that this is normal under the right circumstances, who knows what else they're going to accept. You're turning people into monsters by making it seem like the logical, intellectual, big brain move is to double down on barbarity. And then you have the gall to argue about ethics and morals and why wouldn't you have sex with animals and whatever else you Dawah people say these days. I'm going to take a break because I am mentally drained from realizing the extent of how many millions of people condone this crap. And I hope that you one day grow the stones to think critically and think for yourself. You know how some people are scared of Sharia creeping into Europe? I don't know how that is actually happening in real life. I don't think it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they're making strides in changing the legal system to better suit Sharia. But can you imagine if that did happen? The real issue is city planners would be up in arms. They worked so hard to design these cities for green spaces, for transportation, walking around, quality of life, all that stuff. And they forgot to put a giant stoning arena in the middle of the city where people could watch others being executed, stoned, lashed, whatever, pick your poison. Thankfully, most Muslim majority countries don't carry out stoning, at least not that publicly. But some do, and you'll be seeing a lot more of that as the Taliban take over Afghanistan. So remind yourself every time you hear about how Sharia would, be the answer to this utopian future where everyone lives in harmony, remind yourself that you're going to have to build stoning arenas in the middle of cities.